Seattle expects to add 120,000 new residents in the next 20 years, but we're going to have essentially the same amount of street space that we have now. Given that reality, how do you believe that limited space should be allocated as among cars, transit, bicycles, parking, other uses?
And that's a 1 minute question again, is it?
I'm afraid so.
Okay. It'll be a free-for-all. There'll be a lot of challenges that we'll have to face, and being thinking rational human beings, most of the time, we're going to have to come up with solutions. I saw an altercation at 6 a.m. this morning between a truck driver and a bicyclist. And when I came on the scene, the bicyclist was throwing punches at the truck driver left and right, thankfully not connecting. Yeah, I see it all the time. I'm a motorcyclist, and I travel around the city year-round on my motorcycle, and I have kind of a unique perspective when I look in car windows and see cell phone use is rampant. And I am cut off by angry bicyclists and bicyclists who just don't seem to care. They almost have a kamikaze nature when they're out there. And I can understand that sentiment. Like I say, I'm a motorcyclist. And at times I just feel like people are out to get me, no matter what I do.
About 16% of our land area is in paved streets. So I think there's a lot of space. I think we need to use it more effectively. We need to stop trying to put everything on every street, where we end up serving no one well. So there is space for trucks, there's space for cars, there's plenty of space for bikes, there's plenty of space for pedestrians. There's ways to make our community approachable for all ages, all ages and all abilities. We need things to be able to move through our neighborhoods and through our city. So I think by making some choices on parallel routes, on consciously not trying to put everything on every road, realizing the limitations of some roads, and best matching the uses to the environment that's there.
We are going to add a lot more people, and we're not going to expand our road system, so we have to figure out how to use it more smartly. Two strategies. One is we have to figure out how to dedicate that space to the most cost-effective and people capacity-effective ways. So that means when a bus has 80 people on it, that bus should not be stuck in traffic. It should not be waiting to re-enter traffic. We have bottlenecks like the Ballard Bridge where there's only 4 lanes and the buses get stuck, and at some point we're going to have to figure out how we dedicate some of that right away to transit so that people who are choosing to take transit, which is a much more cost-effective way to move, work. We also need to find solutions so people can live near where they work, where they play, where they go to school, where they shop, so that you don't have as far to travel to.
I am not an expert on transportation, and I don't pretend to be. I don't have all the answers, and that's why, as in my business, I have a leadership team that I work with, and they provide me with the right alternatives. And as a council member, that's how I would look at the issue too. What I do know is, ever since they put in bus rapid transit on 15th Avenue, I've been stuck in traffic all the time, so I don't think that's a good solution. What I do know is people are trying to get through the missing link still right now, and it's dangerous. And they're also trying to get past the Ballard Bridge. So how can you take people out of their single occupancy vehicles? You need bikes, but it has to be safe to get around on bikes.
Okay, last substantive question from me has to do with the environment. The city of Seattle has set a goal of being carbon neutral, which means no net global warming emissions by 2050. And I would note parenthetically that the former mayor actually had an earlier goal which has not been met, I understand. So we have another goal. We want to be carbon neutral. We missed our first one. So my question is, what specific steps, if any, should the city take to meet this goal? And are there innovative ideas from elsewhere that should be considered?
Well, actually, emissions have gone down about 4% over the last 10 years, which is quite an accomplishment with all the people who are moving here. But the urban forest plan its goal was to increase the canopy by 30%. And with all the development going on and the destruction going on in our neighborhoods, I don't see how that's in sync with that. So one idea actually is the Carbon Washington initiative. It's not a city issue, but something that I support, where you're taxing carbon, and at the same time, you're taking that money, it's a revenue neutral program or initiative, and you're reducing the sales tax. So I think that's one way to reduce our carbon emissions.
The two biggest sectors from our carbon emissions, the first is transportation. So a lot of the things we've talked about today, we need to keep doing. Things like parking requirements. When we eliminate parking requirements, that means people that want to choose to live a life without a car aren't forced to pay for that parking spot. So those are the types of mechanisms. Investing in transit, absolutely. Making sure that everyone can walk or bike safely if they so choose to. Those are the types of investments we need to continue to make. We also need to be looking at investing in our electric vehicles. We have a 100% carbon neutral electric utility, Seattle City Light. It's been that way for a decade, the first in the nation. We should be leveraging that to fuel our transportation side. The next biggest sector is our buildings use a lot of energy. We have a lot of great programs right now in helping to weatherize them. We have one of the best building codes in the country as far as making sure they're operated efficiently. Things like the bullet center of models for how all new buildings should be built going forward.
We want to do a lot of building in this town, sidewalks, new housing, new bridges. Those all have a carbon footprint. So every time we build something, not just being energy efficient, we need to look at, are there other things that we can leverage as part of that building to make it more carbon neutral going forward? For example, right now, how many of you have holes in front of your streets from where utilities have been put in? Probably most of us, right? Now we have to replace that entire concrete panel. That's a huge, huge carbon footprint when we do that. There are better ways to put utilities in our streets than we are doing now. As we're building sidewalks through the communities, we should be looking at technologies like that. Other ideas, every community center, every school should have solar panels on it. Period. Start there. Make that easy. Make it a solar cooperative like has been put on this building. Let's make those choices every single day with everything that we do.
We're on the cusp of some incredible technological developments. Storage batteries are increasing in their ability to store wind and solar energy. These are all big factors that are going to come into play over the next decade. Also, I've just got to say, Shell no, we shouldn't be supporting North Sea drilling. And what about banning the sale of water in plastic bottles in anything less than a 1.5 gallon container? Less than 1.5 gallon.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask a question of our reviewers back there. Do we have enough questions to go to 45 minutes? We do. Audience is loaded for air, ladies and gentlemen.
I kind of want to know.
Before we get to that, we have the second round of lightning questions, so get your cards ready. Washington State currently prohibits cities from imposing rent control. Should the city press for a change to this law as part of its housing affordability strategy? 2, should the city further increase its overall density, for example, by increasing height limits for apartment buildings and condominiums as its primary strategy for providing affordable housing? Primary strategy. And this one is a little complicated. It has to do with what we used to call micro-housing, the very small dwelling units. So listen carefully, there are two questions. Seattle currently allows so-called efficiency dwelling units, which are apartments that can be as small as about 220 square feet in size, and congregate residences, which are essentially rooming houses with shared common facilities like kitchens. So two questions about these types of housing. First, do you believe that they're part of the answer to Seattle's housing affordability problem? Yes, no, maybe. Second, should current rules that govern either of these types of housing be changed? Okay. Next question. Do you believe, and as a council member, would you take steps to make sure that elderly and other moderate income people are being forced from their homes? And by that I mean steps other than or in addition to what the city is already doing. Do additional steps need to be taken?
Actually, they're not being
Yeah, you heard what he said.
Yes, that they are not being forced. Do we all understand?
You like the elderly?
We like to be an inclusive community.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Does the city need to take additional action to prevent the loss of its existing affordable housing stock? And I'm talking about housing that already exists. Next, should preserving existing curbside parking in business districts be one of the primary goals in street design? Next, do you favor creating additional bus-only lanes on some arterial streets to improve transit service? Do you support the city's plan to add more so-called protected bike lanes along some arterial streets? Should the city make the preservation of its industrial land and jobs a higher priority than it does? Should the city strengthen its laws to preserve and increase its tree canopy as development occurs? Of course, the implication being, if elected, you would take action to do that. Should the city spend more money to provide housing and social services to its homeless, even if that means cutting the budget elsewhere? Would you support the city's goal of becoming carbon neutral, even if it means lifestyle changes such as discouraging automobile use? Would you support the city's goal of becoming carbon neutral, even if it means lifestyle changes such as discouraging automobile use? The city's goal is to set aside 1 acre of parkland for each 1,000 residents. The city expects to gain 120,000 new residents in the next 20 years, and that means we would have to acquire 1,200 new acres of parks to maintain that goal. Should the city spend the money to do that? And last question, should the city do more to protect pedestrian safety, even if it means lowering some speed limits? All right. Thank you, candidates, and you're now going to be open to questions